Hello, long time no see. This is Code Ode. Welcome back. So, in this video, I want to show you how to implement state management in JavaScript. So, we start off with this simple counter example. We have this counter text, the counter value, which is 0 by default, and then we have this button that whenever we click on it, we want the counter to increase by 1. So, let's see. Okay. Now, let's see the HTML. So this is our web page. We have this HTML structure for our counter. We have the counter text. We have the counter value and the counter btn, our button. And this is our main.js, our JavaScript file. So this is our state. We have a let counter value variable, which has a default value of 0. And then we have these variables to interact with the DOM, with that part of the DOM that is our counter. And then whenever the page loads, we set the counter value text content to whatever state we have for the counter value, which is 0 by default. And then whenever the button is clicked, we increase the state by 1. So we increase the counter value by 1, and then we update the DOM. So you can see that we do quite a few things right here. In this quite simple component, we deal with the state, we deal with updating the state, we deal with updating the DOM, and so on and so forth. Now the question comes, can we do this better? Are there any other ways to do this? Yes. So let's take a step back. A web page is made up of components, right? A navbar, a module, a button, even this counter component. And each component can be seen as a unit of its own. It has the presentation part, which is the HTML structure, the state, which is the data, and some kind of logic behind this component. Well, the idea is to encapsulate all the things that make up a component into a unit of its own, to write these components in a more modular way. And this is what frameworks like Vue.js and React do. If you've seen Vue.js, for example, you've seen those component files with a template where you have the HTML and the script tag where you have your JavaScript with a state and some kind of logic. This is what we want to achieve with state management, but in a more simpler way. I mean, really, really simple. And this is what we are going to do right now. Okay, so let's write some code. State.js. So create this file. In our index.html, add this file above main.js. So script source state.js. Okay. Now, when we talk about state management, we talk about two things. Having one source of truth for our state, which means our state is defined in one place and it can be modified through some known ways. And the second thing is having reactivity. Whenever the state changes, I want to have some kind of side effects like updating the DOM. So let's try start function, read state, we take in initial state, let state, and we destructure the initial state just to lose the reference, to keep that having one source of truth for the state. Okay, now we need to define two function. Get state, which is pretty simple, return, and once again we destructure the state. We want to return the state, and then set state, which takes in an updater. And we are working with arrow functions. What is the updater? The updater is the thing that updates the state, obviously, but it can be a function or it can be an object. We do not care about type safety. We do not check here, hey, is this an object? And so on. We do not care about these things right now. But here we need to check if type of updater is a function. Then we say state, we destructure whatever state we have, and then we destructure the object that is returned by the updater, which in turn takes in the state destructured. Okay, pretty simple, right? So if it's not a function, then it's an object, and we say state, curly braces, whatever state we had, we destructure it, and then we destructure the updater. Okay, but now we need to deal with the second thing, which is having the side effects, the reactivity. So whenever the state changes, we need to have some kind of reactivity. So let's create a new variable listeners, which is going to be a new set object. This is an object which works like an array, but it can't have duplicates values. Okay, and then we create a new function called subscribe, which takes in a listener. Okay, this is an arrow function. Listeners, we add this listener, and we can return a clear function if we want. Listeners, delete this listener. Okay, now we have this thing to subscribe, to create our own side effects. This listener is going to be a function. So the side effects, we are going to write them as functions, right? So whenever the state changes, I want all the side effects to run. So let's see. Listeners, for each listener, and we pass in the state destructured. So this is it. This is all we need to do, right? We have the get state, the set state. We can define some side effects, and then when the state changes, all the side effects are being called. Now we have to return an object with all of this: get state, set state, and subscribe. Okay, now back to our main.js. We can remove, let's see, all of this for now. We don't need this. Const counter state, create state, which takes in an object with a property counter of 0. Now we want to subscribe a listener, so counter state, subscribe, an arrow function. This takes in whatever state we have. Now we want to, of course, update the DOM whenever the state changes. So let's copy this and bring it here. And we can say something like counter value L text content is equal with state counter. Just like this. Okay, but this is not all that we have to do. Then we say counter btn on click. Okay, now it's time to update the state. Whenever we click on that button, we want our state, our counter to increase by 1, basically to update the state. So counter state, set state, it takes in an arrow function with whatever state we have, and then we have to return an object, whatever state we have. Then we say counter, state counter plus 1. So let's fix this. Return. Okay. Okay, are we done? Well, not really. There's one more thing that we have to do. When the page loads, I want to have the default counter value in the HTML presentation part. So let's create one more function. Let's see, const fire, and I want to fire all these listeners like this. fire, and of course I want to return this function. So window on load, we can say counter state fire, and that is all there is to it. Save, and let's see it in the browser. Refresh. Amazing, amazing, awesome, right? Pretty simple. Like, we have our state, we have set a subscriber, a listener, we want to update the DOM whenever the state changes. So this listener is gonna be called whenever the state gets updated, which means whenever we click on the counter button. As you can see, it's quite simple. This is the whole code for dealing with state management in JavaScript.